Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, this is Heath Einstein, Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. Prior to my time at TCU, I spent years as a high school counselor, and my career got started in the admission office at my alma mater, the George Washington University.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good morning, friends. I hope you are enjoying it outside. Spring is the absolute best. You know, it's funny, when I'm in March, I think March is my favorite month. Then I get to April. April's my favorite month. And then May is my favorite month. And then June. But one of those four is my favorite month. So get outside, enjoy the sun, enjoy nature. It just does something for your spirit. So get outside. And I'm saying that from someone who at times in my life has been fairly sedentary. Friends, I can't thank you enough. The volunteers that have stepped up and come forward and agreed to help us with a podcast. Oh my goodness, you're going to see a real difference, both in terms of interviews. It's not done yet, but it's looking really good for me having found someone to take over our website. And I had an initial meeting and oh my goodness, the organization, it looks like it could be really incredible for you being able to find specific topics a lot easier than you can now. I just don't want to get ahead of myself. And I got such good response to requesting of volunteers that I'm going to try it one more time. So one thing we really could use is someone who has experience taking episodes and breaking them into bite-sized doses and getting them up on like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn in particular. I know that we need to do that. We really don't have much social presence. I'd love to be able to see if we have a volunteer who'd be willing to do that. It could possibly grow into a paid opportunity. We don't have a huge budget. We depend on the donations that come in. You know, that's what determines our budget. But if that's something you have experience with social media and you want to give back to the podcast and help us to reach more people, please reach out to me. You can text me at 404-664-4340, 404-664-4340, or you can email me directly to my personal email, which is mark@schoolmatch4u.com. We had 10 volunteers that have stepped up already that are helping with the podcast, but we could really use somebody in social. Now, I have something I want to just plant a little seed I'm very excited about. So some of you may remember Mary LaChance. She was on the podcast with her son, Daniel, and they did an overview of RIT. They talked about careers in computer science. Mary's also a counselor in Counselor Connect. She works with CBOs, and she has started something that's pretty exciting. I mean, she did a demo for me. I was really blown away. It's a tool to help under-resourced students with the college process. And she's working with her brother, who's also a techie, and they've been working on it for a really long time. And students are currently using it, and it's pretty robust. And so Mary's going to be doing a webinar in June. And once we can get this thing situated with our new webmaster, we'll be able to get a Google form up for signups. But it's something you have to see visually. And so she'll take people through the process and show them the tool. And it's really something targeting, you know, if you're a first-gen, under-resourced student, this is designed for you. So look for more information for me about the upcoming webinar. Once again, she already ready to go. I just need to get the the webmaster situation resolved, so I have somebody to load it up for us. But that information should be forthcoming soon. All right, on today's episode, I'm excited, but I'm excited about all episodes, so just know that. Very rarely I'm not excited. You're going to hear part 5 of 6 with Carter and Susan. We're continuing to talk about how to stand out in a competitive admission process. And this advice is for a student who's stand or strong, or quite honestly, any student, really. And then we have a brand new interview. It's with Heath Einstein. He is a member of our co-host team. He's the Chief Enrollment Officer, Vice Provost of Enrollment Management at TCU. And in today's episode, he gives us some updates on TCU. And then we really introduce our topic for the next 3 weeks, which is college resumes. It's the deepest dive we've ever done on college resumes. And I think every FAQ that I could possibly think of about a college resume, I asked Heath. Some of you sent in questions. And so that'll be the last part. And once again, you'll hear that really for the last 3 Mondays in the month of April. All right, without further ado, let's transition to my conversation with Susan and Carter on how to stand out in a competitive admission process.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, in part 5 of 6, because remember we added that segment, where we had Hillary, Susan, and myself last Thursday. So I added another segment, and I'm going to do one more segment next week. We talk about the different ways colleges admit students and the different calendars colleges have and how that impacts your application. We talk about the focus on fit and how that cannot be emphasized enough, not only in your selection criteria of where to apply, but also in the discussion of whether a college selects you. To quote Susan, fit works both ways. And then Carter and I close out with an admissions tip. Listen and enjoy.
I want to know how they best learn and what has been hardest for them, because in the realm of selective colleges, you've got a lot of variation in how they deliver their curriculum, their academic program, as well as their campus life. But a lot of kids don't think that much about how they deliver the academic program. And aside from their liberal arts colleges, where you don't have to declare your major until the end of your second year, and it's about exploration and all that good stuff, versus the rest of the world, the research universities, where they may even admit by major. Not always, but they may admit by major or academic division, but there's much more of a drive to the academic program. And your application is likely to be evaluated in some degree. Some, if we talk about Santa Cruz and UT Austin, it's the nth degree of matched major, and evidence beginning in 9th grade that you're serious about that choice. That's really rare. But the other end of the continuum are the liberal arts colleges, like I just said, where you're being prepared for the entire, choice of majors and curriculum. So if you're picking a school predicated on exploration, academic and intellectual exploration, and that's how their curriculum is designed, they're going to be looking for match. Why is that going to help you be successful and happy? Whereas if, at the places where you're applying for major, you're going to be asked to defend, not just with your emotional, I've always wanted to be a doctor, but what you've done in terms of providing evidence that, again, know what you're talking about. Schools with core curriculum versus heavy duty distribution requirements or open curriculum. This is something colleges take very seriously. Now, some of them ask supplemental questions about that in the application, but not all of them. You really have to know what you're applying for, and introduce that in a way in your application, a natural way. What if a college is project-based learning focused? What if it's a block plan? What if it's on trimesters as opposed to semesters? What if it's urban versus rural? These distinctions have enormous impact on how the curriculum is delivered. Colleges on trimesters are like a death march. I kid you not. They are, what are they, 10-week semesters? And you better love learning fast. Some students do. They love it. They love the idea of not going through a laborious, 15-week semester or whatever. They love the speed, the way that the faculty deliver the curriculum, but you better like a speedy pace. Not all kids do. In fact, it's deadly for some kids that it's too much, too fast. Okay, 3 classes instead of 4, but it's not good. So you better know. A block plan is kind of the nth degree of a curriculum structure. And they, our dear friends at Colorado College and at Cornell College in Iowa, they ask very specifically about how you're going to handle the one course in 3.5 weeks, and then moving on to something else. What about setting? When I have a student say to me, oh, I'll pick on my alma mater, St. Lawrence University in upstate New York, which for a kid from Manhattan, I have to admit, was a match made in heaven. It was what I wanted, what I needed, but I was very intentional about that. When I have a kid go to a school like that and then talk to me about, oh, I love everything, but it's in the middle of nowhere. It's like, you didn't know that when you signed up? Come on, people. But it's not enough to know it. You need, as a prospective student, to understand the impact on campus life and relationships. Small colleges feel smaller when they're extremely rural, but larger colleges might be just fine. It's your own little city within a city.
And in the context of admissions, you need to be able to make a compelling case that you're a fit for that culture and that you're going to thrive there. Like, one thing I like to say to students is a school could have someone, hypothetically, that's the most extraordinary academic applicant they've ever had. They might test the highest on any type of personal qualities. They could be the highest in terms of extracurricular impact. But if they feel like, I don't think this student is going to be happy here, we're too big and they're too small, or we're too urban, or we're too rural, or we're diverse or not diverse, or we don't have the programs. They say they're interested in a major that we don't even have. They might pass on that kid because, one, they're a risk for attrition, and 2, they could be a malcontent in the dorms. So from an admissions standpoint, it behooves you to make the compelling case that all of the unique idiosyncrasies and culture and values that the school has, why you are aligned with that, and why you're likely to be a fish in water in their environment.
Right. And it's not enough to say, well, you have a top 10 business school.
Oh, yes.
Which the last college I read applications for had a top 10 business school, but we always worried about, it was one thing that stuck out. If we didn't see we knew how we got on that kid's list.
Sure.
But if they had more to say about the structure of the curriculum, which was a little unusual,
right,
and the opportunities that they would have. What you just said, Mark, though, for the colleges that are known for intellectual intensity, this is a deal breaker. So who do I mean by that? We could all think of them, but I think of Swarthmore, University of Chicago, Reed, Stanford, places where they don't take any prisoners in terms of intellectual rigor. And it doesn't mean the grading is tough. It might, but it doesn't mean that. It's more that these are students that love to talk about nothing else but academics and intellectual subjects. One of my students who's at the University of Chicago, he said, it's great now because I can talk about quantum computing at every meal, in every dorm lounge. And, that kind of thing where great match, now that student is in a core curriculum and he's also reading the classics and philosophy, but it's all good because he is a happy camper. So when I work with a kid who I have not seen any evidence of them thriving in an intellectually rigorous model, and they're not telling me what it is about their high school that hasn't met that need, I worry about them applying to those colleges because I don't think the colleges are going to see it. And they are very definitely looking for kids who are going to thrive in a particular. Same thing political. You could say the same thing about
Sure.
politics, party schools, unusual facilities. If you have a child who wants to become a curator of museum, I've worked with some kids who, well, there aren't very many undergrad museumology programs, right? But where's that student in terms of art history or in terms of having a museum on campus? Think of the archaeological museum at Beloit, things like that, or the museum program in New York City that colleges have semester programs with. So maybe there isn't an undergraduate major in museumology, but the student has identified how they're going to pursue that passion.
And I
Carter,
just want to
one more tip that you want to get in, and then I'll get a tip in, and then we'll wind it up for our listeners.
I don't know how much this is a tip, but I think it's important to contextualize that this is all great advice, and I think it's important that students do all of this research and self-reflection, all of that. And I think it's important also to note, especially since so many of the listeners to this podcast are parents, that this is so different than what we needed to do when we were applying to college in so many ways. I think some of this is the same. You got to make sure that the major's there that you want. But when we're talking about strategic plans and missions and values, and that is such great advice for these kids. But part of what we do at the Marymount School in New York, where I work, is we'll cap senior course loads because applying to college is like a whole course now. And that senior fall can be so intense. And I really feel like it's important for all of us professionals on both sides of the desk, for parents as well, to really understand that we are demanding and expecting a lot of teenagers at the end of the day here. And again, I think it can be really great work. It helps them learn so much more about who they are and how they work. And a lot of great developmental work can be accomplished through this process, but it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. And kids are going to be at different stages in that. They're going to go at different paces than others. And having that patience and empathy as we support them through this process, and hopefully on the college side, as they're evaluating these students through this process, I think is just a critical piece to hold on to.
Thank you, Carter. And my last thing that I'll share is, there's this vicious cycle, right? People hear college is really hard to get in, so then they apply to more colleges. As they apply to more colleges, the yield of the college goes down. The yield's just a percentage of people that say yes to the offer, right?
Right.
So what that does is it ends up putting more pressure on the college to figure out which applicants are serious and which ones are not. So my tip would be, and we've talked about this before, but one thing I always have to remember is we get new listeners all the time. They don't necessarily go back and pick up the back catalog. So in the common data set, section C7, one of the things that's there, it says level of applicant's interest. If you see anything other than not considered, if it says considered, important, or very important, take that very seriously. Take that very seriously, because people are getting passed over all the time because the school doesn't think they're going to come. That is happening all the time. And so a couple of really good interviews we did on that. Greg Zeiser from Elon and Matt Bonser from Colorado College. They did a great job, I felt, of unpacking why they use demonstrated interest and how they evaluate it. So I would educate yourself on how colleges use interest or engagement as a factor, because it is one of the things that differentiates people that get in and people that don't. And I just see that increasing as people go from 6 apps to 11 to 17 to 25 or whatever,
Yeah.
Like that's a trend that we're all experiencing. Mm-hmm. This has been awesome. I could talk to you guys for another hour, but I have a phone call in 3 minutes.
All right.
But thank you so much, Carter and Susan. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to hook up again and talk about another topic.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
Awesome.
Thanks,
care.
Susan.
All right. Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. So, friends, this concludes my recording with Susan and Carter, but I've been preparing something for you on the same topic that I think you'll find helpful. And I will share that with you for the final part 6 of 6 on Thursday's episode. Okay, friends, let's transition to a brand new interview with Heath Einstein, Vice Provost of Enrollment Management at Texas Christian University, better known as TCU.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, I'm interviewing Heath Einstein. He's one of our co-hosts, but he's just a wealth and a reservoir of information. So I'd like to interview him at least twice a year. And in part 1 of 3, Heath introduced himself, gives us some updates on 4 key takeaways from TCU's new strategic plan. And I asked Heath some follow-up questions. Then Heath shares some of the new college majors that TCU is offering. Then we introduce the topic we'll be covering for the next 3 weeks. And Heath explains why there is some backlash in admission offices toward resumes. Listen and enjoy. Friends, Heath Einstein is back from TCU. Heath, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in case we have any brand new listeners who haven't heard you. You've been on multiple times, and I consider you part of our co-host team.
I'm glad to be part of the family. My name is Heath Einstein. I serve Texas Christian University as Vice Provost for Enrollment Management. I've been here at TCU since 2012, all within admission and enrollment, and I'm really glad to be back.
And I've said this multiple times, but he's been on both sides of the desk multiple times, been at more than one institution, both as a college counselor and on the admission side. And if you listen, it really gives him a unique perspective that I find a lot of people don't have, because he really gets the school-based side and the parent experience. So Heath, why don't you just give us an update on some of the things going on at TCU? A lot of change over there, and I had a great time visiting you about a year ago. Actually, it was April. It was April last year.
Yeah, that's right. Man, it's already been a year. Well, there's a lot that's happening at TCU, a lot of excitement on campus. We have embarked on a bold new strategic plan that has 4 pillars to it. The first is student-centered growth, which of course is quite related to what we talk about here on your podcast. We are seeking to grow our enrollment. We have, quite fortunately, a robust applicant pool. Lots of students want to be at TCU. We are not one of those schools who wants to become uber selective. We're not trying to say no more. In fact, we're trying to say yes more than we have been able to in the past, because there's so many wonderful students who want to be here. So student-centered growth is pillar number 1. And notice that student-centered comes before the growth, because what makes TCU unique among schools of our size is that we feel smaller than we actually are. Partly that's due to the fact that we're almost exclusively undergraduate, but also it's because of the intentional nature of our approach to educating students. Students have a very personal experience at TCU, and so we don't want to lose that. Anytime you seek to grow enrollment, there are members of your university community who understandably grow concerned that we'll lose that personal touch. We're committed to not losing that personal touch. In fact, our board of trustees has said that no matter how big we get, we will retain our 14-to-1 student to faculty ratio. So that's really exciting. The second element to the strategic plan is research, scholarship, and creative activity. TCU is striving toward Carnegie R1 status, so that for your listeners who aren't aware, the Carnegie Foundation categorizes schools by their research output, and it's a combination of 2 factors. 1 is research expenditures, and 2 is professional doctoral students who are graduating, PhDs, EDDs, and so forth. And so we are close, but not there yet, and that takes significant investment in the university and bringing in great new faculty. The third element of our strategic plan is athletics, which, if you look at strategic plans, is actually unique. Most colleges, even colleges that have wonderful athletic programs, they're not putting it front and center and say, this is a big part of who we are. We know that that's the front gate to our university for many, many students, and we want to continue to invest in the success not just of our teams, but of our student athletes. We think that's the differentiator for a school like TCU. where we have athletes who are competing at the highest level and have the choice between us and other major universities. We want them to choose us because of the student experience they're getting as student athletes. And the fourth is community engagement. We're located in Fort Worth, Texas, which is the 11th largest city in the United States. It is one of the fastest growing big cities in the country. There is a lot of diversity in the economy here in North Texas, specifically on the west side of what we call the Metroplex, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so we're really excited to continue to bridge what makes our university great with what makes our surrounding city great.
No, that was fantastic. And, I work with students all around the country, and I can tell when a school starts getting hot because there'll be more people that will come to me with it already on their list. Also, when I suggest it, you get a certain level of receptivity. And then you'll see when students are down to their last 2 or 3, the school's kind of in the mix. And I have absolutely seen that with TCU. I think it's been happening for a while. But yeah, whatever you're doing, keep it coming there.
Yeah, I mean, when I got to TCU in 2012, our incoming first-year class was 1,853 that fall, 1,853. For next fall of 26, or this coming fall, our goal is to have an incoming class of 2,850. So that's 1,000 more students in the incoming class. On a starting point of 1,853, 1,000 more is a pretty hefty percentage increase for just 14 years later.
Yeah, it's like 55% more. And then that's that many, eventually that many more alumni up there talking you up and connections and everything.
That's
and
exactly
any programs that you feel are either new or they're really surging? I mean, a lot of people know your business has been really strong, your pre-med, your nursing, some of those programs have, really strong and been strong for a really long time. Anything you want to sort of herald?
Yeah. Well, you hit on the ones that people most know us for, although it's worth mentioning we have 100 plus areas of study. We're investing right now certainly in STEM. So we will have new programs or growth in programs coming on board in engineering, in biomedical sciences, in aviation. And so those are programs that we are just now starting to recruit for. We've had an engineering, we have a College of Science and Engineering, and we've offered engineering programs in the past. They're relatively small. We're bringing on more programs, so mechanical, electrical, aerospace, and as I said, biomedical sciences. So I think those are some of the newer and even more exciting programs than the ones including the ones you mentioned, which are always at the top of people's lists.
You mentioned the move to R1. How will being an R1 school change the student experience?
Well, I mentioned before that we are heavily skewed toward the undergraduate side. Roughly 86% of our students are undergraduates. As we strive toward R1 and we invest heavily in the research profile of the university, while we're also going to be expanding our graduate programs, that ratio of undergraduate to graduate students is not going to change. And so what that means in a very practical way for undergraduate students, meaning students who may be in high school right now or attending another college and thinking of transferring to TCU, is that the research opportunities for them will be abundant. And as you consider what comes after the baccalaureate experience, whether that is entering the workforce or going on to graduate school, having research on your resume is a differentiator. And I think that opportunities for research here at the undergraduate level exist in ways that they might not exist elsewhere.
Hey, do you think it's fair for a family to take a look at the ratio of undergraduates to graduates at a school and make an assumption that if one is significantly larger, that's probably the focus of the institution?
Well, I think that's a reasonable starting point. I also think, however, it's worth investigating a little bit further and talking to the institution to find out what their priorities are and where they're putting their funding. Because at the end of the day, the money talks.
Sure.
And if the university is putting their dollars toward one area or another, that's going to signal to you what the area of focus is.
And quick follow-up on that. If someone was wondering, well, how could I find out where a school's spending their money? Is that public anywhere? What would you say?
Yeah, often that can be found right on a university's website. People don't realize that. But also you could just ask people in the admission office. I mean, your entry-level admission counselor might not know, but eventually it'll get to a person who's going to have some answers for you.
Yeah, and show me your budget and I'll show you your values, right? So
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So that's a little tip there. Throwing a tip in the middle of a interview, friends. Well, I'm here to talk with Heath about resumes today. And we've got a combination of questions I have for Heath and questions that some listeners have sent in. And shout out to you listeners. I literally told our listeners they had about a 12-hour window to send something. I'm like, I'm interviewing Heath like tomorrow. So if you have a question you want me to ask, you need to listen to this episode immediately and send it immediately. And we had about three or so that did do that. So
very cool.
So let's dive in, Heath. As you know, resumes are controversial. You'll hear some colleges who are adamant they don't want them, mostly because they'll say, oh, I already have the activities section and they're just a reduplication of activities. Or some say it's hard to find stuff on there. I don't have time. And then there's others that love them. So can you explain, what are your thoughts on that people are all over the place when it comes to their views on even liking resumes?
Well, the first thing I would say is that this college admission process is complex. And even as there have been attempts over the years to simplify it, for example, the use of the common application, colleges are individual entities and they have different ways of doing things. And each of the institution's admission offices have different processes and procedures, things they like, things they don't like. And the resume is a really good example of that, because as you suggested, we're going to see across the board quite a lot of variability in what an office prefers to see or not see. I think one of the reasons why there are some colleges who don't want to see a resume that goes beyond what is asked for on the application is part of a larger movement that has taken shape in the past couple of decades that has to do with this idea of equity, that it would be unfair to give someone a leg up because they had the wherewithal to put together some really fancy resume because they had access to high quality counseling or for whatever reason. And so colleges do a lot of work to try to level the playing field. Let's make apples to apples comparisons rather than apples to oranges, which is already inherent in the process because every student is different. They all attend different schools with different curricula, different opportunities outside of school, etc. And so if we could have a simplified activities section and not go beyond that, then we have at least progress toward equity. I think there's an argument to be made for that. On the other hand, I don't know that we necessarily need to penalize students who have done a lot with their time that perhaps goes beyond what the space on the common application or other applications provide them.
Yeah, and I'm all about equity. I worked for Access Organization for 14 years and did lots of access work, even years before that. But the argument against that is, what part of this process is not advantageous to people with resources? Is it standardized testing?
That's right.
Is it essays? Is it your extracurriculars? Is it small schools so your counselors know you and your teachers know you? And being at an independent school that might have somebody like you on the other side of the desk as a counselor that knows how to navigate this, like what we could go on and on. I was watching proudly, I might say, watching UCLA win the national championship on the women's side. I've embraced them being in the Big Ten. I'm a Big Ten guy. And it was a great human interest story. I don't know if you saw the game. I know you're busy, but
no, I saw it. My parents both went to UCLA, so I had a rooting interest in that game.
I know you're from Orange County. Yeah, good stuff. That was quite the whooping, a 28-point win.
Yeah.
But one thing that struck me was the story of the star player for the game who wasn't getting noticed, wasn't getting recognized in terms of recruitment. And
Yep.
so the family switched her to a different AAU team in Oakland.
Yeah, Gabriela Jaquez.
Yes, she had to fly twice a week to Oakland to be on this AAU team. And then she got the exposure and blew up. And my daughter played high AAU, and I saw this happen a lot. But the point is, I thought, well, it's nice that they had the resources to do that. How many people couldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the pushback on the other side, on the resume.
Yeah, I totally see both sides of it. And I will say, having been in this line of work for 25 years, I now see it through the lens of a parent, because I have a daughter who's a first-year college student, and I have two more students, students coming behind her. And so I think that has added a new recognition on my part of what it means to be fair, and also how you want to give your children the best opportunities possible.
You know, I've had the privilege of being able to interview quite a few senior level admissions people like you who fairly recently went through the process of having a kid go through this process. And no matter how much experience a person has, everyone finds it to be eye-opening to just put the parent hat on and not be admissions dad or even former college counselor dad. Any thoughts on that?
100%. I had that experience both going through the search. So when we visited other college campuses, I was trying not to be critical of how the universities presented themselves from a professional standpoint, but rather look at it through the lens of the parent. But also I had that experience once my daughter chose her college, which happens to be the college at which I work. I got to go through orientation, and I learned things about my own institution that I had no idea about. And I thought, my gosh, this makes me even prouder to work here, because we have an incredible faculty and staff who really know what they're doing. So that was really fun for me.
Well, it says a lot that she chose TCU, because I know from talking to you, you didn't make her go to TCU. You allowed her to have an open process. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's get back to resumes. So another thing you'll hear sometimes is a resume is great because, one, some colleges ask for it, but it also can be a tool you could give a school counselor to give them a little bit of information about you. And then occasionally some interviewers like resumes. Not all do, but some do. Any thoughts on that?
I always tell high school students that they don't need to wait until the college application process to start their resume. In fact, if they do, it's very possible they're going to forget things that they did earlier in their high school journeys that could be relevant, maybe even in ways that they don't realize. Because one of the things that any adult in their life is going to look for, whether it's a prospective employer or a counselor, as you've mentioned, or a college admission officer, is growth. And seeing the progression from 9th grade through 12th grade can be really enlightening. So those resumes that the students are putting together can have real practical implications in multiple parts of their life. It doesn't just have to be about the college application process. Now, you might decide to highlight certain elements. So you might start with sort of a base resume that you then tailor to a particular audience. But initially, the kinds of things that you're going to be putting onto that resume are going to be pretty consistent across the board.
Friends, this concludes this part of my interview with Heath Einstein. Hope you join us next week for a deeper dive into college resumes. Friends, on Thursday's episode, you have the final part 6, and I'm flying solo on this. Just some things I want to share with you about how to stand out in a competitive admission process that I've been taking notes on for a while. I think you're going to enjoy it. And then we'll have a question from a listener. You're going to have to come back to see what it is. I'm trying to decide amongst several questions. And then, that's right, I promised it, and it's been over a year. But an old-style college admissions spotlight. Old style. old school, where I visited college and do a deep dive and give you my feedback on my experience. And I did that at the University of Miami. You're going to get a full 1 hour deep dive over the next 3 weeks. Lisa joins me to talk about that. So hope you'll tune in and see us on Thursday. And friends, it's decision-making time, and you know what that means. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career trajectory. By the way, if you notice, I went a little gentler on the pounding of the pulpit on that. It's because when I did it about a minute ago, it jacked my computer up and it finalized the audio and it went right into producing the episodes. I had to re-record. So a little gentler on the pulpit pounding today, but the message is just as clear. It's where you go. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there. And it's what you do when you get out of there. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our international admissions expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.